as a teacher myself for music lessons, I think it's so important to remind adults that you're never too old to start something. You're never too old to continue something. You're never too old to start as a complete beginner. I love teaching adult students. The first question I feel like I always get is it too late for me to start? Time and time again. So society is putting this idea into people's heads over and over again. And I think that it's not just from a point of view of even starting something new, but just the idea that you're always too old. You're getting older, you're getting too old, you're going to be old is just this constant thing we hear in society. And I think it's really sad because my adult students are tremendous. They're amazing. Every lesson they come in 150% focused because they're making the time for this in their busy schedules. They're paying for it. They are deciding that this is what they want to do. And I'm not saying that children can't be super driven and focused, because of course they can be, but there's a big difference between your parents telling you you're going to go to your lesson now and you being an adult person with a job and hobbies and maybe a family or whatever, and being busy and deciding I'm going to make time for this.
Hey dancers, welcome to the show. I'm Julie and I'm your host today on this episode of Broche Banter. I both own and teach at Broche Ballet, a virtual ballet school just for adults. Join us as we explore all things adult ballet. Today on the show, I chat with Kara, a Celtic singer and musician who also shares her love of traditional Celtic arts with her many adult students. She also started ballet a few years ago and is about to get on pointe for the first time. We connect on so many levels as teachers of adult students about the notion of it being too late or of a person being too old, and how we can really express ourselves in the arts at any age. It's really a touching conversation, and Kara's kind and passionate soul will absolutely encourage you to chase your dreams, whatever they may be. Enjoy! Welcome to the show, Kara. I'm so excited to have a chance to chat with you today. What fun to be able to sit down together.
Oh yeah, I'm so been looking forward to this. It's going to be so much fun. So I am a vocalist and I also play the fiddle, which is just a violin. I get asked that a lot, so I feel like it's always worth mentioning. Fiddle and violin are the same instrument. You will typically hear people in folk music, any kind of folk music, call it a fiddle, whereas violin is typically more going to be assumed that it's a classical or an orchestra type of musician, maybe jazz. You know, not always, everyone's different, but definitely in the Celtic world, you play fiddle. You'd very rarely hear someone say, oh, I play Irish violin. No, you play fiddle. I play also a little bit of tin whistle and am learning to play a very, very unusual medieval instrument called the hurdy-gurdy, which is a crazy thing to obtain. Basically, you can't get them ready-made. Someone has to build them for you. There are only like a couple people in the world who make them. So it's very interesting.
Have you always, so you mentioned you've been performing since you were a kid. Did you start all of these things when you were a kid? I know you started what was it called again? The medieval instrument, you started that now.
Yeah, I started that just recently, the hurdy-gurdy.
Hurdy-gurdy.
So I guess the backstory that probably brings it all together is that my father is a professional musician and has been since he was a teenager. So I grew up basically, he has a recording studio as well. So I grew up being in the recording studio with my dad from the actual time I was a baby, because there are home videos to prove this. Home videos of tiny Kara like playing on the keyboard with my dad.
That's adorable.
And my mom in the background being like, let the baby sleep. So my father's background is actually more in like 60s and 70s kind of alternative rock. He played a lot of like King Crimson, Procol Harum, a lot of like British bands, kind of like almost psychedelic, like alternative rock. He was a Hammond B3 player, which is awesome because I do actually, we were talking the other day about pop music and me saying I don't listen to it at all. Probably like the most modern music that I listen to on a regular basis that is not Celtic or world is like a lot of still the 60s, 70s stuff that I grew up listening to my dad play. But yeah, my dad switched over to start playing Celtic music in a Celtic band when I was probably maybe around 6 or 7 years old. So I grew up from that age with pretty much purely Celtic music. And that was the age that I started playing violin. I had a couple years of classical training and then switched over to traditional Irish fiddle for the rest of my life. And as far as singing, just for as long as I can remember, I would sit at the piano with my dad and sing, and never took formal lessons as a vocalist because not it's not always the sound that you want as a traditional Celtic vocalist, I guess. Lessons improve everything for everyone, and I've learned and grown a lot over the years, but a lot of vocal lessons are taught kind of as more of a classical or opera style of voice, and that's a really different sound than you want as a traditional Celtic folk vocalist anyway. So yeah,
Wow.
since I was a little kid, basically, with those things, and then over the years pick up some other things as I've gone.
And you did Irish dancing at some point in all of this, is that true?
Yeah, so growing up with river dance being a huge part of my childhood, that was kind of like the famous show for anybody in traditional music. Well, for a lot of the world, that was their first taste of any kind of Irish dance or music culture. I was absolutely obsessed with river dance and with Irish step dancing from a young age, but pursuing the musical faction of it so much, I only really had like little bits of lessons here and there. Sometimes we play like a lot of Irish festivals and things like that. Sometimes there I'd get little bits of lessons or workshops. But I started actual formal dance lessons in my mid-20s. So, very much an adult, much an adult for that.
So you are a musician. This has been quite the year for musicians. Last week we had another musician on the show as well. What a year for musicians. Are you still teaching at this point? Are you still performing? What does your musician life look like in this world?
Yeah, it's crazy. It has been really a tremendous year, I think, not just for musicians, but any kind of performers, anyone in performing arts and entertainment. I am very, very grateful that I am still able to teach and have been teaching since the pandemic started, just completely online. So I have hardly any people, if any, given how things look in the area at the time, coming to me in person. Now, I do have the benefit that I teach out of my home, so I'm not in a public space. So if I do have one person who feels comfortable coming from time to time, and we both feel that that's safe to do, we wear masks, we sit apart, and it's not like I have a waiting room or that I have a bunch of people coming in and out. But for the most part, all of my students are Skype and Zoom. Now, thankfully, I've always had Skype and Zoom students because I have a couple of students who are out of state. So for me, it wasn't a tremendously difficult crossover to make since I had already been doing it to some degree. But there's a huge difference, of course, between all of your students being online, as you very well know, I don't have to tell you, and having just a few from time to time. As far as performing, no, the last gig that I had with my full 4-piece band was in March of last year, March of 2020. We shut down here right before St. Patrick's Day, which is, being a Celtic band, one of our busiest times of the year, followed by summer for summer festivals and concerts. So we had been fortunate to get in a large concert right before shutdown, because a lot around here anyway, I don't know what it's like in other places, but a lot of places try to stagger their St. Patrick's Day concerts because there's a lot of competition. So we were able to get that in right before the call came that it had become a pandemic and that stay-at-home orders were starting to be put in place. So other than just a few live stream types of things here and there infrequently, no, I haven't played a normal show since March, and that is bizarre. I probably have not been able to say that since I was a little kid,
Yeah.
a little girl, that it's been this long since I've played a normal show.
So you have an interesting mix of starting dance and music as a child and as an adult, and some self-taught and some trained. And now you teach as well. Tell me about the kinds of people you teach. Where are they on this spectrum? What kind of people do you enjoy teaching the most? Let's talk about the adult learning process a little bit.
Yeah, so I would say, so I've been teaching since I was 16, that was interesting. My dad actually signed me up to teach lessons when I was 16 at our local cultural arts center. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't think anyone's going to take me seriously, this 16-year-old, teaching lessons. And it was such a learning process. I still remember very well those first couple of lessons that I taught. And the people that I was teaching lessons to, even at 16, were still mostly adults, because I think, given that I'm teaching Celtic fiddle, I'm not maybe getting the same kind of person who would be going to a music studio to just get their child started in violin lessons. Right. So I was getting people who were coming in, for example, when I was 16 or 17, had a man who was in his 80s, came in and he said, I know I don't have a lot of time left. I just want to learn to play a song on my porch. I just want to be able to pull the fiddle out and sit on my porch and play a song. And as this, young person, this teenager, I had to think to myself, what is the best way to teach this person to achieve their goals, but, to not sacrifice too much quality along the way? I really had to kind of reckon with myself in what I felt was okay to omit, I guess. Like, where can you kind of skim corners and still give someone a good and authentic education, knowing that they don't want to study this for 10 years before they can play something? Not that you have to, but this person wants to learn to the best of their ability in the time that they have left to really enjoy every step of the process. And even though it was a long time ago, I've never forgotten what that felt like. And really, that man, I wish I could remember his name, he was just a star. I mean, he was just a blessing, especially as someone who was still really young, to have a person come in and say, this is so important to me. This is my goal. Can you help me get there? I felt a lot of gravity in that situation as a teacher. And I really wanted to work hard to make that happen. And he did get there, by the way. He did. I don't know where he is now, but he played wonderfully. He was so driven and just the sweetest man. But so most of my students at this point are adults. I collect a lot of adults along the way. I do also kind of advertise myself to adults, and I just really enjoy teaching them. I also enjoy my kids too. They're phenomenal. They're super sweet. I love talking to them. But the adults just really bring me a lot of joy, I guess, because they're so driven. They're carving this time out. They really want to do this for themselves. And a lot of my adult students will tell me that this is their time for themselves each week. And some of them, this is about it. Maybe it's this and an exercise class, or maybe it's this and, they have another hobby. But this half hour or hour, however long they're spending with me, is the time they've carved out for what they enjoy, and, not having to take care of someone else or work or clean or, whatever else is on their plate. And I guess I take that really seriously. I want them to have a great time. I focus very strongly on having a super relaxing atmosphere for people so that they are learning as much as they possibly can, but that they're also having fun, which is a massive part of this style of music too. You know, folk music is for everyone. It's very, very different idea and a very different approach than most classical musicians take.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I have so many questions. I don't even know where to start. First of all, I almost teared up hearing you talk about your first student. What a special gift to have been a part of his life and to help him with that. It's very special when you get people who have a really specific goal and a specific dream, and you have the I mean, honestly, it's an honor to be able to help them with that. And they entrust you with these few years of their life. And they say, I think you can help me with this in these few years. I don't have that many years. I only have a few, and you are the one to help me with it. That's kind of intense for a 16-year-old to handle. Even for, a 30-year-old to handle, that's kind of intense, but a very touching story. And I think it's very, it's so true. The points you bring up about the goals of an adult learner, and the goals of an adult learner, in the ballet context are probably similar comparably to his goals, where they want to feel pretty, they want to feel graceful, they want to feel free, they want to express themselves, they want to know the basics of the classical technique and how to do it well. They don't want to go make a fool of themselves, but then again, they're not looking to spend 8 hours a day learning this, and they want to still achieve some of those goals. So how do you structure a program that gives them what they need technically, helps them feel the actual experience of it, but more quickly gets them to those expressive goals? Whereas kids, they don't really allow you to have those expressive goals until several years into your training. But as an adult, we really want to express ourselves from day one. That's why we're here. It's an outlet. It's very different than the process of making a kid sit there and do the same thing over and over again for 5 years before they can play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that you just touched on is incredibly important and really crosses over for both worlds. And that was that both ballet and music, and of course I'm biased, but I especially feel this way about Celtic music. A lot of times people getting into it, they want the whole package, and what they want is for that art form to transport them to something else. A lot of the people who are coming to me wanting to play Irish or Scottish music have that ancestry in their background, and they want to connect to it. And of course, it's a beautiful culture all around. It's a beautiful culture of mythology, a beautiful culture of dance, a beautiful culture historically. And people want to connect to that. And playing the instrument makes them feel like they can connect to their ancestry, to the culture, which is something we don't have a lot of as Americans. It's a mixing pot here. We don't have really what I would consider anyway, as someone who's very into folklore, a distinct American culture all as one. Of course, we have many different kinds of people with different cultural backgrounds, but I think that's why a lot of people here, and there's so many festivals and things like that, people want to connect to some kind of culture that is either in their ancestry or that they're just really drawn to. And I think ballet is very much like that, in that most people are probably not taking ballet just because they want to get some exercise.
Right.
I think
Very
they
unusual.
want, yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure it happens, but
there's much more efficient ways to get exercise.
yeah, for sure. I think people are taking ballet because they, at some point in their lives, have had a dream that they could feel like they were on stage in the Nutcracker, or they, whether they actually do or not, could envision themselves in a tutu. And, being graceful, and the entire aesthetic that goes with ballet, that it is beautiful, because I find it super beautiful as well. And I think people want their hobby to be transforming. And I think they want it to be imaginative and to take them someplace else for a little while. And that's why we as teachers, if you really care, which I know you do, and I know I do, and I know a lot of other great teachers who do, you want to give people that experience because you know how meaningful it is to you yourself.
Yeah, it's so true. The excitement of sharing it with someone is actually quite immense when you really love it yourself.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting you talk about, this 80-year-old man who you taught, and he seems to have not thought that he was too old to get started. But I know a lot of people come to me thinking that they're too old to learn something. Do you have that same experience?
Pretty much every time. I would say I rarely have someone who starts with me as an adult. And, we're talking ages maybe 21 to up into their 60s, as a general age range of the people I would say I have start the most often. And the attitude is no different for the people in their 20s than it is for their 50s. The people in their 20s still think that they're too old and will ask. And probably just about every inquiry that I get starts out with, I know I'm old to be starting, or maybe I'm too old, or I don't know if you accept adult students, or I don't know if there's any hope for me ever. And it breaks my heart, to be honest, even after doing it for all these years and being so used to people thinking that way. I still am always kind of jarred by it to see it written down or to hear it in person, that is how deep this idea runs with people, that even at 21 years old, they've seen some 5-year-old prodigy somewhere, so they think, well, I didn't start at 5, I'm too old to start now. And I wonder how many people, and I bet you do too, working with adults, how many people let that stop them for another 20 years, and then they're in their 40s and they're thinking, well, now it's really too late. And it's like, well, okay, it's not. But also, if you would have started 20 years ago when you initially thought it was too late, you'd be a master by now. Yeah, and I understand. We live in a society where I think especially women, I do think it's particularly terrible for women, feel like they are too old by the time they're out of college, basically. And it's absurd. It's ridiculous. It needs to stop immediately. Women are amazing and beautiful in every age group. And it really isn't ever too late. It's only too late by the time that you can't do it anymore. You physically can't do it. And that's probably maybe a little bit more of a concern with something as physical as ballet, but with an instrument, it really shouldn't be. And also there should be some kind of instrument you could play at any stage of your life.
Well, and even with, even with dancing, you can sit in the chair and do port de bras, and you can, you can express something through your movement, no matter what you can do physically. I've told this story on the show before, but I think it's important in this context too. One of the most touching performances I ever saw was a group of dancers, maybe in their 70s or 80s, who all had Parkinson's disease. And they had all lost a spouse, and they were dancing on stage about having lost their spouse. And there was an empty chair in the corner, and I'm going to cry. And it was like very intense. And they're just, but I'm literally going to cry here. It was like very, very touching.
For sure.
I mean, they couldn't walk, but they were sharing a very important part of their life to us.
Yeah. Well, and just to quickly segue back to the folklore thing, because I'm obsessed. Everything always comes back to folklore for me. There are a lot of societies in the world, and certainly a lot of societies throughout history, where not only did you not lose anything in the eyes of the people around you as you got older, you gained it.
Yes.
If you were the elder of a tribe or of a clan, you were the wisest, most sacred, most respected person there.
Yeah.
And we just kind of have a slightly different view, I think, of getting older here. I feel like not a day goes by that I don't hear someone say, either to me or to someone else, something along the lines of, oh yeah, getting older sucks, or like getting older is the worst. I think it's unfortunate, really, because as far as I know, none of us can cheat it. So I don't know why we would want to walk around saying that. I hope I never get to an age where I say that to a young person.
Yeah.
I hope I never, ever get to an age where I look at like one of my young students or younger friends and say, yeah, enjoy life now because it's going to all go, and be terrible when you're older. it's a really negative way of looking at getting older when, like you said, maybe you will have to adjust your expectations a little bit for certain things, but at any age, you could bring someone to tears
Yep.
with the way you expressed your art form.
Right. It's really so true. And I think there's a difference in how we personally view older people and how we view them on a larger scale, because I think we all love to sit and listen to our grandparents and to the older people in our life and to, you know, anyone who's been through a lot. And I think in my younger years, in my early 20s, all I wanted to do was to be old and wise so that I could be, you know, that I could have that kind of experience, because I just admired so much the older people in my life at work who could be in the face of crisis and just be totally chill and know what to do in that circumstance. And I always wanted to be around that and be that. And so I think for me, I've always admired age and wisdom, but societally, like I also have this internalized sense that I don't want to get old and I don't want to be old and I don't want to like lose my abilities in my body. And, you know, we don't want to lose these things. We all have that inside, but on another level, like I love old people. They're awesome. They have so much to offer and it's incredible.
I agree. And I completely relate to that. I mean, I'm not going to be a hypocrite about it. I also don't particularly look forward to getting to an age where I lose certain abilities, but I try not to let that affect the way I live my life. I don't see any point in dwelling on it.
And you get new abilities. You get new abilities. You get new wisdom. You get new, maybe better in some ways. I mean, I don't know. Like there's a lot of things about being old that seems pretty cool. Like maybe stuff doesn't faze you as much. Maybe you're more self-assured and more confident. And, you know, there's all kinds of things that you get. Certainly at 30, I feel a lot better than when I was 20. So
same. Absolutely. I feel the same way. Yeah, for sure.
So I have one more point I want to ask you about in this whole too old thing, which is interesting because there's many areas where we don't have this. I feel like for whatever reason, music and the arts has this too old thing, but like no one's wondering if you're too old to start running. People are doing that all the time. No one's wondering if you're too old to like be promoted to manager at work, which is an entirely new skill set that you would be learning at work. You know, when it comes to having kids, we're okay with having kids older and older. And that's, you know, you have your career, then you have kids, and that's an entirely new endeavor that you're willing to start at the age of 30 or 40. That's going to take you 20 years to figure out, right? We're like so open to other things that'll take us 10 to 20 years to learn, but we're so not open to music and arts, which is going to take us 10 to 20 years to learn. I don't understand. What do you think about that?
I think part of it is just a stigma that has gotten attached, maybe promoted by people being exposed to videos of very young people who are, you know, really unusually good, even at what they do, prodigies. I don't know. I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
I think that people believe that if this, like I said before, like if this 5-year-old kid is a prodigy at something, then why should they bother?
Right.
But of course, the funny thing is, that doesn't change at any age. I mean, here in my 30s, I'm surrounded by people, by peers who are much better than me at everything, of all ages, kids and adults. And actually was from a young age, because I started playing out, like playing shows professionally when I was really young. I mean, probably 12, I guess, 12 or 13. I started playing shows with my dad. And I played with people who were all much older than me. I was playing with people who were generally in their 40s, you know, and up when I was a little kid. So I felt like, honestly, terrible all the time. I felt like I was awful. You know, I didn't feel like a child prodigy, or I didn't feel like I was really good because I was a kid and had all this time ahead of me to learn playing with these adults. I felt like I was terrible because I was a kid who was still trying to learn things, playing with people who were masters in their field, who were, you know, getting closer to being like middle-aged and had all that lifetime of experience under their belt. So I grew up very, very humble. I hated listening to myself. There were many times that I was in tears when I had to when you record something, you listen to like a 10 million mixes of what you've recorded. And I hated it. I hated listening because I was like, I'm terrible. I'm just a little kid. These people are all really good.
Yeah.
So it's funny to me because I wonder if I'm sure that there are some of these, really little kids out there who are like, yeah, we're fantastic at what they do. But I also think there are a lot of kids who these adults are looking at being like, wow, that kid's amazing. I shouldn't even bother starting. And the kid's like, dude, I've only done this for like 2 years. Like, I'm not good. I need like a lifetime of study ahead of me, And I don't know. I think it's kind of funny in a way. But I think people are afraid to start dance and music because they feel like there's a time limit on it. I really don't know why with music. I think that's probably very much like a pop music type of thing. You have to be like on the Disney Channel, right? You have to be like 20 years old and you have to look a certain way. And that's very much a pop music thing that really doesn't exist in traditional music, and really even in a lot of other kinds of music as well. But most people are exposed to pop music. So that's how they are always going to think of music, is you have to be like a 20-year-old, very attractive Disney Channel star in order to make it. So if you're 45, it's too late.
Right.
Well, okay, I don't know, maybe it's too late to be a Disney Channel pop star, but it's most certainly not too late to learn music. And I can guarantee no one cares. But with ballet, I would guess, and I'm sure you're much more enlightened on this than I am, I think probably people think the same thing, that it's very physically demanding and that they know that your chances of having a professional career are very slim after a certain age. So I suppose they think, well, why would I even bother starting? Then it's too late. But then the question is, well, what is it too late for? Clearly, it's not too late for thinking about getting up onto pointe, which I know is a huge issue amongst people. Because when I started ballet, which I've done ballet off and on throughout my life in little spurts, but when I seriously started again about 3 years ago, I was like, oh yeah, I don't think like adults can probably do pointe, because it had never been mentioned to me that it was a possibility. So I also was affected by that idea of, yeah, I guess probably adults can't do that, or like my feet are not very good for it. I'm sure you have to have like really certain feet and all of this stuff. But I guess I never thought to myself, oh, I couldn't get strong enough to do it, or I couldn't become decent at it. But again, it's back to what we were talking about, those expectations. I wasn't going into it thinking, yeah, I'm going to be a professional at this. Not that I'm sure there are opportunities, even if there aren't a ton, I'm sure there's something, but I wasn't going into it with like, oh, I'm going to try to join like a professional ballet program. I just really enjoyed it, and I just really wanted to do it. And so maybe that's the heart of it.
Right.
That we should be telling everyone, do you just really enjoy it and want to do it? Then don't worry about getting to a certain point. Like the only guidelines out there really are the ones you're setting for yourself.
Mm-hmm. It's really the crux of it, I think, because there's a difference between making it to the Olympics and enjoying something, right? Like it's too late for most people to make it to the Olympics, even when they started at a young age. Like 5 people get to go to the Olympics, and like 5 people get to be professional pop musicians, and like 5 people get to be professional ballet dancers at the New York City Ballet. So even if you started at a young age, the chances that you make it to the literal 0.5% to the top is actually next to none for anyone. Someone makes it there. You can work hard and get there. There's so many factors into it. Not that you can't do it, but like the number of people who actually have that chance is very low to begin with, because there's so many of us who want it in so few spots. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a massive pyramid of people who are just like enjoying the heck out of it, performing at their church, performing at their local community, performing in a ballet company with adults, making their own company, making videos on the internet. Like there's a massive pyramid below that tiny percentage of people who are willing to sacrifice their life for this art form. And that's what it would take to get to the top. And most of us, I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to do that. I faced that choice in my early 20s where I kind of harbored the idea of going pro, and then did some training programs and was like, nope, I have way too many differing interests. There's no way I can be single-minded. And that's what it would take to get there. But I just love the heck out of it. And there's room for just loving the heck out of it. You don't have to be in that 0.5% at the top to love the heck out of it and make your life more fulfilling.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I completely relate to that as someone who has just a bunch of hobbies and interests myself and always has. I've never been able to easily answer the question, what do you want to do when you grow up?
Yes,
And I'm grown up now and I still can't fully answer it because there are a lot of things that I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I always tell my adult students when they start, what are you wanting to get out of this? Because you're the only one who's going to put a limitation on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I knew from a young age that I didn't just want to be a musician. Now, as I get older and older, that is how I think of myself first and foremost. That's how I describe myself. That's my job. But that was never the only thing that I wanted to be. I went to college for ancient history and folklore. I mean, I didn't go to school for music. I never wanted to. I'm glad. I don't regret that. I think I would have hated it. But I always wanted to foster a bunch of different interests. And I'm really grateful that I've found a way to kind of bring them all together in my life. There's a lot of crossover with my interest in folklore and with folk music. Of course, it goes hand in hand. I don't know that I foresaw that when I was a kid or that I ever would have thought of it. I remember being really little and wanting to be a teacher. My mom is a teacher. And then as I got older, I was for some reason really offended by the idea that people would only see me as a teacher. I don't know why. Like in my teens, I was like, I'm not a teacher. It's just a thing that I do. And now I fully embrace that title. And when people say, oh, she's a, teacher and a musician, I don't correct them and say, no, I'm a musician.
Mm-hmm.
I am a teacher and I really enjoy that. It's become a big part of my identity and is one of the most fulfilling things that I do in everyday life. And as much as I miss performing, I get so much joy out of being able to at least help other people discover something that they might love.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I'm really grateful. It's been an insane year. No one could have foreseen that something like this would come and change our day-to-day life so drastically and change, for you, for me, for a lot of other people, our actual careers, our actual businesses.
Yeah.
But it did. And you either have the option to say, well, then I guess I'll throw in the towel, or you make it work somehow. You keep plodding along because what else can you do?
It's still your life, right? It's still every day of your life. You still want to do the things that matter to you and that matter to the world around you.
Absolutely.
So it's funny, we talked very little about ballet, but we talked all about ballet at the same time, right? Because these issues that we face as adult learners in general are universal, I think, throughout the arts, throughout all of this, where, we feel like it's too late. We feel like our life is passing us by. We feel like all these things, but really now is the time. Now is the best time. I usually finish with some ballet related advice, but I want to finish with general advice. Why we've talked a lot about it not being too late for adults and them taking the time for themselves. Why is it important for adults to bother to take time for themselves to do something that someone might see as frivolous, of learning how to point their toe better or learning how to, play an instrument? Why does that matter? Why should we take the time for that?
Well, I think going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think it's meditative. I think it's transformational. I think that adults are told as they get older that it's not okay to imagine anymore, that imagination is for children. But of course, anybody in the arts, is going to laugh at that because you think like movies are being written without imaginations. You think dances are being choreographed. You think music is being made. All these people are using their imaginations and their creativity to do that. But I think that for a lot of adults, especially depending on where they've grown up, what kind of careers they have ended up in, maybe even what kind of family they're surrounded with, creativity is almost discouraged. You're told to, and I really hope this changes. I see this changing a lot with the younger generations that I spend time with. And I think that it will change, and I think that's fantastic. But I think that for some people, and especially maybe for certain age groups of people, there's this idea that life should be very serious. And, you know, you need to do your duties, you need to complete your routine, you need to make money. Of course, we do all have to live. We do all have to make money to live off of to some degree. But I think there's maybe in certain generations, there's a real focus on that like the most important thing is that you have a steady job and that you can do all of these things that are expected of you as an adult in daily life. You know, hashtag adulting. And to choose a hobby is to choose to make time for yourself. And I think, personally, it's to choose to make time to imagine something else, to imagine something outside of the life that you're currently living. Maybe that's getting a little bit too outside the box. I don't know, but that's how I see it. I think for a lot of my students who again are coming to me to learn folk music and to also learn about the culture and to kind of connect with the culture, they come in maybe inspired by a show like Riverdance, or maybe inspired by a movie, or even just inspired by going to Ireland, which is one of the most magical places in the world. And they want to recapture that. So there is an imaginative, creative process to that. It's not just that they want to make time to sit down and do something. I think they want to make time to be someplace else for that lesson or that class, and to imagine maybe a part of their life that they would like to change for the better. And I'm not saying that it's someone coming in saying, I don't like my life. I don't think it's that at all, but I think all of us like to sit and daydream. And if you can do that while also learning a new skill, I think that's what keeps people coming back. I think that's what hooks people on something, is that feeling of, I'm learning something and it's transporting me to a world that I love.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's so true. You can just be someone else for a moment. You can have the freedom to be you, and sometimes you don't even know who you is. And so it's a process of learning who you are, who you want to be when you grow up. Let's say, who you are in your soul.
Exactly, and I think that time and time again of doing this, you do initially start out seeing yourself as someone else. And it culminates in you realizing that you've been that person all along. And it took this learning process for you to grow to a point of seeing that. And I think that's the best thing in the world. And that can happen at any age, not to keep coming back to it, but this isn't just a growth process for children. This happened to this man in his 80s. He achieved that image because he did come in with an image. We can't make it out to be this really black and white thing. This man came in, he imagined himself sitting on his porch playing a tune on his fiddle. I'm sure he had a picture in his mind. It was too specific of a request. He saw this version of himself, and that's what he wanted in his, final time on Earth. And to watch him achieve that, yeah, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that process. And it changed me as a person, and it changed me as a teacher. And obviously, having brought it up at the beginning of our conversation, I think about it often.
Yeah, I'm incredible. I think this conversation has been incredible. I feel both happy and about to cry and inspired, and just so really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like there's so much in common in our journeys. And even though, as I said, we hardly touched on ballet, I feel like we touched on ballet in all the ways that our listeners and our fellow adult dancers need to hear.
Oh, I'm so glad. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, Julie.
So much fun.
Thanks for listening. For more adult ballet, you can dance with us in our online studio with over 20 hours of live Zoom classes each week, including pre-pointe and pointe, or our on-demand technique library with structured courses, variations, and recorded live classes. We also offer ballet exams just for adults, including ballet technique, pointe, and pre-pointe for individual feedback and guidance. Don't forget to follow our studio on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at Broche Ballet. I'm Julie, and this was Broche Banter. Happy dancing!